Hi, I'm Matt Shepard. Coming up on this edition of Shep Shower and Shave, some encouraging signs and the most irresponsible team in baseball. We're brought to you today by Northwestern Tech. Individuals that are entering the HVAC field are seeing their pay potential go way up. They want to figure out where the best place to get their on-the-job training is. Well, no question, it's Northwestern Tech. It's the HVAC school that gets you trained, certified, and into the field in only 10 and a half months. We're also brought to you by Fifth Avenue in Royal Oak. That's the place you want your fantasy draft this year. They'll provide free Wi-Fi, a draft board, a dedicated server, a large pizza, food and drink specials for your league. All you have to do is email them by sending your request to fantasydraftparty@fifthavoyaloak.com. And we're brought to you by Nate Knopf Designs. Find his work on Instagram or on Facebook. He's the one who designed our good-looking Shep Shower and Shave logo. Look, the Lions are 2-0 on preseason play, and that's not a big deal. I don't want to make too much of a record. You shouldn't either, and I doubt you are. Records don't really matter in exhibition play. We all know that. Hell, the Lions were perfect during their preseason the year they went 0-16 in 2008, right? But there are some things we can take from the preseason. Look, if we're not going to look at anything, if we're not going to evaluate anything, what's the point of playing the games? Why do you watch? Why do you read? Why do you talk about it? So there's got to be some type of nugget, something that interests you, and something that you may take away. Now, granted, this Friday's game against the Patriots will shed a little bit more light on perhaps this team's ability. But the first couple of games give us a slight glimpse of what some Lions can do. Again, I stress and understand they have squared off against two teams that are expected to struggle, Indianapolis and the Jets. Neither team showcased a quality quarterback or wide receiver, and both held back their best running back threat. So when you're game planning, they weren't even game planning, so forget that phrase. When you're going up against Scott Tolzien, it's not something that you want to read anything into. When you're going up against Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg, it's not a big deal. When the best wide receiver you're going to cover for the New York, if you're going up against T.Y. Hilton and the Colts, hey, I get it, that's fine. But going up against Robbie Anderson in his second year out of Temple for the New York Jets is not a big deal. When you're not having to tackle Matt Forte, then is it really a big deal? When there was no Frank Gore for Indianapolis, is it that big of a deal? It's really not. So I get it. But there is something. How would you have felt if the Lions lost both those games? You'd be pissed, right? I mean, you'd be bummed out. You'd be frustrated. And given them the annual label before the first week's kickoff. That's what it would be. I had some jackass actually tweet at me prior to the Lions and Jets that it's going to be two high school teams, which shows you some people's mentality, the moronic point of view, the idiocy, okay? I wanted to tweet back, think about this for a minute. Cyrus Kwanjo, now you didn't see him play against the Colts. You saw him play against the Jets, and he was bad. He was the starting tackle for Alabama when they won a national championship. He was the #1 rated offensive lineman in the country when he came out of high school. And you think it's two high school teams getting ready to play one another? That is stupid. It's asinine. It's moronic. It's not even worth a retweet and a response. Because people like that, there is no talking to people like that. They don't get it. They've never gotten it. And they'll never understand it. Now, if you've listened to this podcast or heard my radio show in the past, you know I don't like predictions before I know what a team's final roster is going to look like. I mean, you and I could probably guess if we sat down in a room, had a couple of Labatt's and said, hey, give me the 45, 46 guys you think are already on this time, we could come up with those names for sure. But until that final roster is shaped, and until other teams' final rosters are shaped, I'm not sure you want to go there Writers have to do it. Bloggers have to do it. Websites have to do it. Hell, websites, as soon as the national championship game is played, they start talking about the following year and who's going to win next year's national championship, and they don't even know the recruiting class yet. So to me, it's just something they have to do because their editors require them to fill some space. That's what sports has become. So I completely understand that. And I want you to understand this too, though, that when you look at this team, while so many people are going, Shep, why don't they go out and get a certain veteran player, a Trent Cole, for example? Why don't they go get a Dwight Freeney, even though they're 35 and 37 respectively? Why don't they do that? Because when somebody gets cut, when one of these teams cuts a pass rusher, it might be better off for Detroit to grab that guy who is this close to have made his team but couldn't break through because the Patriots are that good, because the Texans' defensive line is that deep. You might be able to kind of filter that type of talent onto your roster. I thought this team had a decent shot at over 500 with Taylor Decker healthy. But after watching Greg Robinson early in camp, I thought they'd be in trouble, and a 500 season would have been a stretch. But Robinson has gotten better as camp has progressed. And quite honestly, he's looked very much the part of a starting left tackle in the two games. Again, put an asterisk next to it because we're not going to read too much into it. Rick Wagner has been better than I originally thought. I was talking with Ian Eagle, a friend of mine, before the game Saturday. He does the Jets preseason TV. And he was taken a little back by the contract the Lions gave Wagner, but he also understood the need. And he actually told me afterwards, I could see the improvement. We saw T.J. Lang for the first couple of series for the first time this year, Saturday night. But he's a 9-year vet. He's a Pro Bowler. He's going to catch up quickly. Travis Swanson has flown under the radar. But we shouldn't forget how this team struggled after he was injured last season. He missed 4 games last year, and they weren't as good. It's simple as that. They were not as good with Graham Glasgow moving to center. So I've been encouraged, not sold, but encouraged with the play up front by Detroit on the offensive front. Yes, it can be better, but considering the early issues with Robinson, considering the early issues with health, or the lack thereof with Lang, I felt pretty good about that unit. My other primary concern, and it remains, is the defensive line. This is an area that was the biggest concern going into camp for you, me, and I would guess for just about everybody. All right, that's where let's pull out the cliches right now, shall we? You know, you win in the trenches. I know a lot of people feel defense wins championships. Sure, I'll buy. It's a major component, but you win in the trenches, right? What did Bob Quinn say when he first jumped on board with the Lions? When he first became the general manager, you want an idea of what he was going to do for this team? What did he say? He said, you win games in the trenches, and you've got to have big, strong, tough, durable, versatile guys in there. That's what he said. When he first took office, that was a direct quote from Bob Quinn. What does he do? He goes out and he drafts Taylor Decker. He drafts Graham Glasgow. He drafts Joe Dahl. In this offseason, what did he make sure he did when Taylor Decker got hurt? Went out and got Greg Robinson, got Cyrus Kwanjo. May not work. Kwanjo may not work out. They may cut his ass. I don't know. But he went out and he created some depth. He wasn't going to war with Cornelius Lucas. Wasn't going to do it. So that was a priority for him. What did he do in this offseason defensively? He went out, he got Cornelius Washington, he got Akeem Spence, he got Jordan Hill, he drafted Jeremiah Ledbetter, he drafted Pat O'Connor. Last year he drafted Anthony Zettel. They went out, they liked what Alex Barrett does as an undrafted rookie out of San Diego State, welcomed him in. He acquired Ego Ferguson from Chicago. Last year he went out and got Armonte Bryant. Now, they may not be J.J. Watt and Khalil Mack and guys like that. There may not be a Clay Matthews involved in that. But you're going to need depth up there. So he wanted to make sure he went out and got somebody. But that defensive line was the biggest area of concern going into camp. And you and I both know, in a perfect world, it would be an ideal world. It would be Ziggy Ansah returning to his 2015 form. But he hasn't even dressed, let alone practiced. They lose Kerry Hyder and Brandon Copeland in the preseason opener, which made us worry even more. Counting on Anthony Zettel, who's a good dude. He's from West Branch, Michigan. Stuck it out through Penn State when a lot of people could have jumped ship. I give him a ton of credit. He's worked his ass off in the offseason. But he's a second-year, sixth-round pick who has just one career sack. Counting on him seems a little unsettling to me. Each of the last 3 years, I get that a player has burst onto the scene without us expecting it. George Johnson in 2014. Remember, he had 6 sacks. The only 6, by the way, of his career. Because he signed a big deal with Tampa and had no sacks. Devin Taylor was the surprise 2 years ago when he boasted a career-best 7 sacks, or almost half as he has in his entire career. Last year it was Hyder, who had 8. Now, could Zettel be that guy? Sure. It could also be Cornelius Washington. It could be Ego Ferguson. It could be Jordan Hill. It could be Akeem Spence. Washington, by the way, has never had more than 2 sacks in a single season. Ferguson hasn't had any in each of the last 2 years and has just 2 total in 3 years in Chicago. Hill is sackless in his last season, and Spence has 6.5 over his 4-year career. Now, it's not necessarily fair to bring in Jordan Hill, per se, because, and Akeem Spence, they are both more DTs than DNs. But if you think about it, that's a lot to ask for those guys to suddenly, not one of them, but all of them, have career years. This is a team, and I've talked about this on the Shep, Shower, and Shave podcast in the past, that had 26 sacks last year. That's the lowest in 16 seasons. That ranked 30th last year in the league. Where are the sacks? Where are the quarterback pressures going to come from? The 4 acquisitions that I mentioned, Washington, Ferguson, Hill, and Spence, all have, I wouldn't say Ego Ferguson, but Washington, Hill, and Spence have looked good in camp so far. But those 4 acquisitions total have 17.5 career sacks, or 3 more than Ziggy Ansah had in his best single season. Still, the defensive line has been pretty damn good. It's applied pressure. It has sacked the quarterback, not Tom Brady, not Matt Ryan, not Aaron Rodgers, not Drew Brees, guys they will see during the regular season. But the effort, the work ethic, the athleticism is there. This defense is predicated on pressure. And I suppose most defenses are. Some, you can get away with it when you don't quite have it because you got really good corners. But you look even Denver, okay? I mean, even Denver, despite having 2 really good corners, right? Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr., for example, you still need the pressure from Von Miller. You still needed the pressure from DeMarcus Ware. Here, you don't have those types of corners. You got Darius Slay, sure. Are you sold on Nevin Lawson? He works his butt off. As Jim Caldwell told me last week, he's as tough as the day is long. That doesn't always get you what you need, though, right? I will say this about Nevin Lawson. He's the 4th-year guy out of Utah State. I know he's only 5'9", $190. But he was among the league leaders in fewest yards allowed per coverage snap. He allowed 46 of 70 targets completed. He was doing some things pretty well. Put it in perspective, okay? Darius Slay allowed 35 of 62 passes completed. So those are good numbers. Jim Caldwell told us this. You've got to be, you and I both know this, you've got to be a tough son of a bitch to play corner. Not physically, per se, but physically and mentally. You have to be willing to forget it. Aaron Rodgers, remember when Nevin Lawson first got in the league, Aaron Rodgers targeted him an NFL record 21 times in a game. And I think he only completed one of the passes. Could be wrong there, but I believe that's what I was told. Completed just one of the passes. But we'll see what happens with that. What they're counting on, because they used their draft picks at different spots. All right, when they go out and they said, okay, we need a linebacker. We need an every down linebacker. So they go out and they get Jared Davis. You like the pick? I like the pick. Okay, good. He's versatile. He's tough. He's smart. He's instinctive. Immediately while the draft's going on, I'm thinking, okay, now you go defensive lineman, right? You need some pressure because you don't know what's going on with Ziggy Ansah. Last year it was Kerry Hyder. They go out and they get Tease Tabor. And what do they love about him? Instinctive, can jump routes, knows football. I mean, he's really, really smart from a football standpoint. Like off the charts smart. So he anticipates very well, and actually, he's picked it up in camp. I know people get caught up in 40 times, but this dude has done a really nice job in picking up the schemes, the game plan, and the defensive playbook so much further along than people ever thought he could be. Corners take some time, though. Remember that. There are 3 positions, specifically in the NFL, that takes a little bit longer to adjust to. Quarterback, cornerback, and tight end. All right? So I want you to keep that in mind. But I looked at it and then I thought, okay, you definitely, now you got to go defensive line, right? They go out and they get Kenny Golladay in the 3rd round. Have you liked Kenny Golladay? The way he's used his body, he had 2 touchdowns against the Colts. Wasn't a huge factor against the Jets, but he made a catch against the Jets that shows you the type of beast that he can become. And keep this in mind. He did that against Morris Claiborne. Morris Claiborne, whether you like him or not, he was a 6th overall pick out of LSU. He played 5 years in Dallas. He's got 41 starts under his belt. All right? He was a first-team All-SEC. He won the Jim Thorpe Award. All that stuff that you like to talk about at the end of a season, and you get ready for the NFL draft every single April. What do you say? Look at what this guy did. Morris Claiborne was one of those guys you used to talk about. And look at what Detroit did against him with Matthew Stafford and Jake Rudock, quite honestly. Kenny Golladay, it eases your concern a little bit. Then maybe you thought, okay, defensive line, right? Then they go out, they get the tight end, Michael Roberts. And there's a lot of you rolling your eyes. Oh, come on. Well, look, you didn't want Eric Ebron in the 10th overall pick. I didn't either, by the way. Now a 4th round on a tight end. When do you want to take him? I know what you're saying. At the expense of a defensive pressure applier, though? Come on. The plan was with the free agents. There are ways to build teams. You know it and I know it. They're not always through the draft. You can get them in trades. You can get them in free agency, too. And that's the route Bob Quinn decided to do. Bob Quinn, as a rookie general manager, said, I'm going to build my offensive line through what? The draft. I gave it a thumbs up. I don't know how you felt about it, because most of you talk out of both sides of your mouth. Most of you will say, I don't want a quarterback in the 1st round. Look at Tom Brady in the 6th. There aren't running backs. They've devalued the position, so I don't want him in the 1st round. I sure as hell don't want a tight end in the 1st round. Well, who do you want? You've basically limited to 2 positions, defensive end and corner, right? That's what Lions fans always say. I want that corner. I just gave you an example of a guy who was 6th overall, Morris Claiborne, and he played 5 years in Dallas. I want my 1st round pick to play longer than that in my town. So you didn't want the tight end. I can't necessarily blame you, but 4th round, that's pretty good value. All right? Now, they went defensive line a little bit later on, but the defensive line they addressed through free agency. When will we know? That's the best question. That's the one I wish I had the answer to. Are we sure about Cornelius Washington? See, you don't know much about him because he's in his 5th year out of Georgia. And he played in Chicago, right? And he only had 10.5 sacks in 4 years in college. But what Jim Caldwell told me he likes most about him is that he's an absolute load, plays with heavy hands, sets the edge, and collapses the pocket. We don't know much about Akeem Spence, the 5th-year guy out of Illinois, unless you remember watching him in the Big Ten. Signed a 3-year deal worth $10.5 million. Originally a 4th-round pick of Tampa. Good size inside. You don't know much about Jordan Hill, unless, again, your Big Ten recollection is better than mine. 5th year out of Penn State. Played in Seattle. Come on. I mean, he played 3 years in Seattle. That's the barometer. That's the blue book. That's the team you always say everybody should be compared to. One of them, anyway, along with New England. Right? Okay. So we'll see what happens with the defensive line. But I do believe there are some things that I found encouraging. Not that I'm sold on them, as I mentioned, but things that I'm encouraged with. And I bet you are encouraged with it as well. Shep, Shower, and Shave, brought to you by Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue is your fantasy football draft headquarters. League commissioners, here's what you get when you reserve your draft party at Fifth Avenue. Become the most popular fantasy football commissioner. I've never been a fantasy football commissioner, but I know this. If I were in a fantasy football league and my commissioner said to me, hey, man, we're going to do our draft party at Fifth Avenue because we get free Wi-Fi, my immediate thought would be, I can get free Wi-Fi in a lot of places. You got a draft board. Okay, well, I can make a draft board. Come on. We're going to get our own server with a large pizza, drink, and food specials for our league. Plus, we get a fantasy football playbook for every person for 17 weeks of special Fifth Avenue deals. I'm sold. That's it. That's what you want. So, commissioners, reserve your day. Reserve your time right now. Send your request to Fantasy Draft Party at 5th Ave, RoyalOak.com. That's Fantasy Draft Party at 5th Ave, RoyalOak.com. We're brought to you by Nate Noth Designs. His work is on Instagram and on Facebook, and he's got that good-looking Shep, Shower, and Shave logo to boast about it as well. We love it. So we thank Nate Noth for his hard work. And by Northwestern Tech, HVAC is all they teach. They've perfected their hands-on program for the last 38 years. Their flexible scheduling allows you to keep you working your job while training for your actual career. In 10.5 months, you'll get trained, certified, and into the field. Northwestern Tech, the HVAC school that works for you. Call right now, 248-358-4006, or go to their website, northwesterntech.edu. All right, let me talk a little bit about baseball here for a moment. The Tigers have become an afterthought. You know it, I know it. Even with a Sunday win over the best team in baseball, the Dodgers, the takeaway was limited. I want you to think about this for a minute. Los Angeles is 52 games over 500, plus 52. Folks, the Tigers own 54 wins on the year. LA's a plus 215 in the run differential. The Tigers, a minus 53. Think about that swing. Dodgers haven't lost a series since June 5th. Detroit hasn't won but 4 series in that same time frame. Justin Verlander was outstanding yesterday. Now, he can give the Tigers organization what it needs most, the future. I mean, he's one of the Tigers' all-time greats. Would you say that? I can't say that I'd rather have him over Jack Morris, but he's been as close to iconic in his time here as you can imagine. And he's stepped up his game recently. He's won 3 of his last 4. He's lasted 8 innings or more in 2 of his last 3. He's lowered his ERA. He's lowered his whip considerably. He has made himself extremely valuable. Which gets me to the most irresponsible team in baseball, the Houston Astros. They have a general manager by the name of Jeff Lunau. And I think he himself is irresponsible in his job if he doesn't do what he is supposed to do. If he doesn't trade for Justin Verlander. Now, I know what a lot of you are saying. The trade deadline came and went. Well, if you clear waivers, okay, then things are a little different up until August 31st. And Houston's not in any danger of missing the playoffs. They're 12 clear of the field in the West. They're 76 up and 48 down. They have the best record in the American League. They don't have the, you look at the National League, and the National League is clearly having a better season. That doesn't mean they're better teams, but they're having the better season right now. But this Houston team that lost to the A's 3-2 has had all kinds of issues. They really have. They've had all kinds of issues recently. And it's a serious problem for them moving forward. They should be, anyway, very concerned because of the route that their team is on. The Astros may have the league's best record, but it's primarily because of a monster first 60 games. Since early June, they have hovered around 500. That's where they're at. Their starter's ERA in August is over 6. Their postseason quote-unquote rotation has just 4 quality starts since. Brad Peacock gave him one yesterday. I mean, even players like Dallas Keuchel, who's kind of the face of the Astros. Well, I don't even know if he's the face of the Astros. I mean, Carlos Correa, Jose Altuve is the face of the Astros. But look, my point is Dallas Keuchel's well-known, and people respect him, especially in that clubhouse. Even he and other players have openly questioned the front office lack of movement at the deadline. We've seen the Dodgers, we've seen the Nationals, we've seen the Red Sox, we've seen the Yankees. Ask yourself, who's been the most impressive? And I don't think there's any question LA has been the most impressive team in terms of depth and balance and skill. But Houston could be on par with them if they add a proven starter to the top of their rotation. Verlander is that guy. The timing is right for the Astros and the Tigers to make the deal. More for Houston than the Tigers, because I will admit, and Al Avila has said this before, trading Justin Verlander in the offseason might be a little bit easier. It might be easier because of this reason. Teams have budgets. Teams can get rid of contracts. Teams can pave the way for their increased spending. Okay? So it might be better off for Houston to wait. But then they have to wonder this. Was it worth us waiting to hold on to Kyle Tucker and Derek Fisher and Forrest Whitley? If you're the Detroit Tigers and you know the Houston Astros are a quality starting pitcher, and don't give me Francisco Liriano, okay? He's been up and down. Quality, I mean, a guy that team can take the field and feel like, you know what? We're in this thing. We're going to win this thing tonight because of the way Justin Verlander pitches, especially in the postseason. It changes the entire mood of a clubhouse. How many of those guys, Correa, he's hurt, Altuve, Bregman, Gonzalez, any of those guys, how many of them are going, man, I really hope we hold on to Kyle Tucker. I can't wait till Forrest Whitley is pitching for us. I think Derek Fisher is going to be a really good player someday. You think they're talking about, I mean, Forrest Whitley right now is in Double-A ball. He's a 19-year-old. He's a big kid, by the way, 6'7", 240, right-handed pitcher. How many of them are looking at Derek Fisher? And Derek Fisher's played a little bit in the bigs. I think he's played like almost 30 games, batting about 230, 235 or whatever. How many of them are looking at Kyle Tucker? He's 20 years old. Do you think they're going, man, the future's bright? No, those guys are playing for now. Those guys want it now. They feel like they've got a hell of an opportunity right now. And I know that can't be Lunau's primary focus. He's got to think of now and the future. I get all that. And it's not like his team's in dire straits. But when they meet Cleveland, they're going to be more concerned than they usually would have been with a team that has 8 more wins than that Cleveland team. When they play Boston, they're going to be concerned because that Boston team, they're going to win the East. All right, they got 71 knockouts. That Boston team has been there, done that. Dustin Pedroia has done it. Mookie Betts has done it. They've got guys who've been there, done that. Mitch Moreland, Hanley Ramirez, whomever. And they've got a ton of talent. Bogarts, Benintendi, Bradley Jr., all those guys. That's the way it's going to work. Houston doesn't necessarily have that deep of a roster that's been through that. And they don't have the pitchers who have been through that. They do if they collect a guy like Justin Verlander. That's a young Houston team, I've talked about this before, and I'm even more adamant now because of this. You see the way things are going. That is a young Houston team that has some opportunities for young guys eventually, but for the most part, they are set. Altuve's 27, Bregman's 23, right? Fisher's a 24. Martin Gonzalez is 28. Marisnik's 26. Springer's 27. Where are they playing them? Where are they going to go? Forget about Carlos Beltran. I know he's 40 years old. Where are those guys going? Where are their good young studs going? The reason you draft, one of the reasons you draft and you get those really good players is so you can get additional really good players. So if they want to concentrate and they want Brad Peacock and Colin McHugh and Dallas Keuchel, who doesn't bring it heavy, and Mike Fiers, and they think that's going to get them over the hump in the American League, they're going to be proven wrong. They are. They're going to be proven wrong. One guy can make that big of a difference, because if they go up against that Boston team, and that Boston team trots out there the guys that you and I both know have been there, done that. When that Boston team sends Rick Porcello, and I know he's not having a good year, all right, and Chris Sale, who's lights out, and David Price, and I know what his postseason is, and maybe a guy like Drew Pomerantz, who doesn't have that type. It's a different ball game. Those guys are going to be much better off, not to mention their bullpen. I mean, with Joe Kelly and Craig Kimbrell and Addison Reed, and those guys, much better off. When that Houston team goes up against Cleveland, who was just there a year ago, who felt like they've been almost robbed, and that Cleveland team sends out Carlos Carrasco and Corey Kluber and Danny Salazar, even though some of those guys are struggling a little bit, right? Been there, done that. Even Mike Cleffinger, for crying out loud. I feel a lot better from a starting pitching standpoint with Boston and Cleveland than I do with Houston. And I think Houston feels the exact same way. Otherwise, they wouldn't be openly bitching about their general manager's lack of moves. It'll be much more beneficial probably for the Tigers to wait in the offseason. Maybe that's when a team like Houston finally gets the message and says, holy crap, we blew it. We had a great opportunity. We didn't take advantage of it. We're not going to make that same mistake again. Unfortunately for a team like that kind of thinking, that may have cost them by then. Thanks for listening to Shep Shower and Shave. We're brought to you by Fifth Avenue in Royal Oak, by Northwestern Tech, and Nate Knopf Designs.